In August of 1946, the United States Navy launched the largest military operation ever sent to Antarctica. 4,700 men, 13 ships, 33 aircraft. It was officially titled Operation Highjump, and it was scheduled to last between 6 and 8 months. It ended in 8 weeks. 4 men died during the operation. The official reports recorded their names: Henderson, Williams, Lopez, Woodall, and attributed their deaths to weather and accident. The complete archive of Highjump sits today in public files of the United States National Archives, in the CIA Reading Room, and in the Declassified Black Vault Library. Anyone can read it. Few do, fewer still finish. But Highjump was not the beginning. It was the answer to a question that had been quietly accumulating for over 4 centuries. A question first raised by maps that should not have existed, and refined by an expedition the Third Reich never fully explained. This is Antarctica. And to understand what happened in 1946, one must open what we sealed centuries before. And at the end of this video, something is waiting. It does not appear in any other vault I have opened. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth without an indigenous human population. 14 million square kilometers, 98% of its surface buried beneath ice that in places is over 4 kilometers thick. It is colder than Mars in winter, the driest desert on the planet, the windiest, the most isolated. And it is the only territory in modern history where 12 sovereign nations, including the United States and the Soviet Union, in the middle of the Cold War, signed a treaty in 1959 prohibiting free access. No military operations, no nuclear testing, no mineral extraction, no unrestricted exploration. They signed it in 18 months. They have renewed it ever since. Beneath the ice, there are over 400 known subglacial lakes. Some have been sealed for 15 million years. Cavities below the bedrock that no light has touched since before primates existed. Ecosystems that should not be there, surviving in chemical conditions closer to the moons of Jupiter than to anywhere else on this planet. It is not a continent, it is a vault, and every vault implies something worth locking away. But these men were not the first to suspect what Antarctica was hiding. The cartographers of the 16th century had already mapped it, centuries before any official record claims it was discovered. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis completed a map of the world, drawn on gazelle hide, that he presented to Sultan Selim I in Constantinople. The map survives. It is kept today behind glass in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul. Along its southern edge, Piri Reis drew the northern coast of Antarctica. He drew it without ice. He drew it with rivers, with mountain ranges, with detail that matches what we now know lies beneath the ice sheet. Detail that Western cartography did not achieve until the seismic radar surveys of 1957. Antarctica was not officially sighted by Europeans until 1820. It was not mapped beneath its ice until the 20th century. Piri Reis claimed his source was a collection of older maps. Some of them, he wrote, dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Others, he implied, were older still. In 1531, the French cartographer Orontius Phineas produced another map. His Antarctica is also ice-free. His Antarctica has rivers running from interior highlands to the coast, rivers that exist exactly where modern radar surveys reveal ancient riverbeds beneath the ice today. In 1559, the Ottoman cartographer Haji Ahmed drew the Bering Land Bridge between Asia and Alaska, a land bridge that has been submerged for at least 10,000 years. 3 maps, 3 impossible coastlines, drawn by men who copied sources they refused to name, of geographies that should not have been known. Antarctica froze approximately 34 million years ago. For these maps to be accurate, someone, at some point, would have had to chart it before the ice arrived. The mainstream explanation is coincidence, misinterpretations of South American coastlines, wishful imagination dressed up as geography. The mainstream explanation has always struggled with the precision of the rivers. Someone, somewhere, had mapped Antarctica when it still had rivers. And in 1938, the Third Reich decided to find out who. In December of 1938, on the eve of the largest war in human history, Adolf Hitler dispatched a vessel called the Schwabenland into the Antarctic Ocean. Officially, it was a scientific expedition. Officially, it was about whaling rights. Officially, it was a routine territorial assertion. It mapped 600,000 square kilometers of Antarctic coastline in 8 weeks. It dropped iron flags marked with the swastika every 25 kilometers from low-flying aircraft. It claimed an entire region of the continent for Germany and named it Neuschwabenland, New Swabia. The region they claimed was in Queen Maud Land, the same area, almost exactly, where the Lago Untersee lies beneath the ice today. What did the Third Reich know that justified sending a military expedition to the bottom of the world while preparing to invade Europe? The official answer is whaling and prestige. The unofficial answer is that the German Antarctic expedition of 1938 photographed and mapped territory that, for reasons that have never been publicly explained, the Nazi high command considered strategically essential. The Schwabenland returned in April of 1939. 5 months later, the Second World War began. Whatever the Germans had been looking for, they did not finish finding it. 7 years later, the United States Navy decided to look in their place. Operation Highjump began on the 26th of August, 1946. 4,700 men, 13 ships, 33 aircraft, the largest naval expedition to Antarctica that had ever been assembled, or that has ever been assembled since. It was commanded by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, Jr., a man who had already led 2 of the most celebrated polar expeditions in American history. Byrd was not an adventurer. He was a senior officer of the United States Navy. He had access to classified intelligence. He had the trust of 3 presidents. And in 1946, he led the largest peacetime military operation his service had ever launched, into a continent that had no enemy. Highjump produced 49,000 aerial photographs. It mapped vast portions of the coast. It tested cold weather equipment, naval logistics, polar aviation. These were the official objectives. The unofficial record is stranger. The operation was scheduled for 6 to 8 months. It was withdrawn after 8 weeks. The official reason cited was the early approach of Antarctic winter. The unofficial reason has never been clarified, because the Antarctic winter does not arrive in early March, and Highjump's logistics were designed precisely to operate through it. On the 30th of December, 1946, a PBM Mariner flying boat designated George I went down. 3 men were killed: Wendell Henderson, Frederick Williams, and Ensign Maxwell Lopez. The crash was attributed to a blizzard. The surviving crew was recovered 13 days later. The damage patterns photographed on the aircraft have been described by some independent analysts as inconsistent with a controlled emergency landing. On the 21st of January, 1947, a 4th man, Vance Woodall, died during shore operations. The official cause was an accident with vehicle equipment. The records are thin: 4 deaths, an operation cut short, a withdrawal that has never been adequately explained. And then, in March of 1947, the Admiral spoke. Returning from Antarctica, Byrd gave an interview to the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio. International news service syndicated it. The quotation that has survived, translated back into English, reads as follows: "The time has ended when we were able to take refuge in our isolation and rely on the certainty that the distances, the oceans, and the poles were a guarantee of safety." He was warning his country about something from Antarctica. He did not say what. He did not need to. Byrd then went almost completely silent on Highjump for the next 8 years. The files were sealed. The interviews were buried. The men who had been there did not speak of it again. The Navy reclassified portions of the operational record multiple times between 1947 and the 1970s. Some files remain restricted today, nearly 8 decades after the events they describe. The Antarctic winter, apparently, was not the only thing that ended Highjump early. And then came the satellites. In 1959, the same year the Antarctic Treaty was signed, the United States Victoria Land Traverse conducted seismic and gravitational surveys across East Antarctica. Beneath the ice of Wilkes Land, they registered something that did not belong there: a mass concentration, a region where the gravitational field of the Earth bent in a way that geology could not explain. In 1962, the geologist Richard Schmidt proposed an interpretation. He suggested it was a buried impact crater, the remnant of something that had struck Antarctica long before the ice. In 2006, the GRACE satellites of NASA confirmed and refined the measurement. The mass concentration was 300 kilometers across. The surrounding ring structure, visible in radar imaging, extended to approximately 480 kilometers in diameter, more than 2.5 times the size of the Chicxulub crater, which is believed to have ended the dinosaurs. The dating, where it has been proposed, places the impact at roughly 250 million years ago, the same geological window as the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the most catastrophic die-off in the history of life on Earth. 95% of all marine species lost, 70% of land vertebrates extinct, a planet that had to begin again. We have always assumed that whatever caused it was a stone. More recent satellite measurements have refined the picture further. The anomaly does not behave as a simple buried mass. In some zones, the gravitational signature suggests density higher than expected, in others, lower, as if whatever lies down there is not a single object, but a configuration, something arranged. The official scientific interpretation remains probable impact crater of disputed origin. The unofficial interpretation is silence. But the gravity anomaly is not the only thing under that ice. In Queen Maud Land, in the same region the Schwabenland mapped in 1939, in the same general territory that Highjump's Western group photographed in 1947, there is a lake. Its name is Lago Untersee. It lies beneath 3 meters of ice that never melts. Its waters are so oxygenated that they reach the maximum saturation physically possible. Its pH is 10.4, alkaline, closer to ammonia than to drinking water. Its temperature has remained stable for thousands of years, and in its depths there are stromatolites, cone-shaped structures of living microbial life. The same kind of structures that dominated the Earth before complex organisms existed. The kind that the fossil record places between 3.5 billion years ago and roughly 540 million years ago, when they were supposed to have gone extinct. They are still there, still alive, still building, slowly, in a lake that should not exist, in a region the Nazis claimed and the Americans surveyed, in a continent that 12 governments have agreed not to explore freely. NASA visits the Lago Untersee regularly. They describe it, in their own publications, as the best terrestrial analog we have for Europa, the moon of Jupiter believed to hide an ocean beneath its ice. The official scientific framing is that NASA studies Untersee to prepare for the search for life on other worlds. The unofficial framing is that NASA studies Untersee because something there is teaching them what to expect. The only thing we know with certainty is that whatever is down there has been there longer than our species, and that the agencies who tell us they are merely training visit it more often than they fully explain. If we put the pieces together, the maps that should not exist, the expedition the Third Reich never fully accounted for, the Operation Byrd ended in silence, the cratered anomaly beneath the ice that the satellites cannot stop detecting, the lake where life persists from before our species had a name, a pattern begins to emerge that official science has been unwilling to name. At this point, the explanations begin to multiply. Some have said it was a pre-human civilization, older than ours, wiser, drowned beneath the ice when the planet last changed its mind about who would inherit it. Others have said it was a vanished people, the ones who drew the maps, the ones whose names we no longer have, whose monuments we mistake for myth. Others speak of cavities, of vast chambers below the bedrock, of a world beneath the world, not the hollow earth of Victorian pamphlets, but something stranger, something colder, something documented in fragments by geophysicists who do not publish what they cannot explain. And then there are those who say what the rest will not, that they came from somewhere else, that what struck Wilkes Land was not a stone, that what Byrd warned his country about in 1947 was not Soviet aviation, that what the satellites detect under the ice is not a remnant, it is a presence. I do not know which of these is true. I have begun to suspect they are not separate explanations. I have begun to suspect they are the same story, told from 4 different angles, by witnesses who never compared notes. Pre-human, pre-flood, pre-everything we call recorded, aliens, some have called them, others have refused the word. The first ones, the older guests, whatever name we give them, they were here before we were. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty in 18 months. The United States and the Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War, unable to agree on Berlin or Korea, agreed on Antarctica without difficulty. They locked it down. They prohibited military operations. They restricted access. They classified everything that mattered. They have renewed the treaty every decade since. They have never explained the urgency. I think about the 4 men of Highjump more often than I should. Henderson, Williams, Lopez, Woodall, and about the silence of Byrd between 1947 and 1955. There are forms of silence that say more than any document ever could. I think about the Schwabenland leaving German waters in December of 1938, sailing toward a continent of no obvious value, dropping iron flags onto a coast that no one was contesting. I think about cone-shaped life forms in a lake that should not exist, beneath an ice sheet that covers a structure 480 kilometers across that science still cannot identify. And I think about Piri Reis in Constantinople in 1513, drawing a continent with rivers, waiting. In the Chronicles of the Void, the coldest places guard the oldest secrets, and Antarctica has not yet finished telling us its own. And if the maps were drawn before the ice, and the ice came after, then the question is not when they arrived. The question is when they will allow us to remember that we are the visitors. If what I have shown you has unsettled you, there is another archive I opened before this one, a lake in Siberia, 7 Soviet divers who descended in 1982, 3 never returned. That descent is waiting for you, on the screen now. And what I promised you at the beginning is at the bottom of this vault, in the description below. The rest is all yours.